Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Expensive Coins History channel. There are coins, and then there are coins that quietly sit in drawers, piggy banks, or old jars, waiting for someone to realize they are worth more than a brand new luxury car. Now imagine this: a simple, ordinary-looking Canadian penny, the kind most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up anymore, suddenly being valued at $51,000. Not gold, not ancient, not covered in diamonds. Just a small copper coin from 1994. And the truth is, someone watching this right now may already have one without even knowing it. Because what we're about to uncover is not just the story of a coin. It's a story of time, overlooked details, and the quiet transformation of something common into something extraordinary. So before you dismiss this as just another old penny, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you might start looking at every coin you own very differently. Let's go back to 1994, that the world was changing in subtle but powerful ways. Technology was beginning to reshape everyday life. Economies were shifting, and yet, cash still ruled daily transactions. Coins passed through millions of hands every single day, unnoticed, unexamined, and unappreciated. Among them, the Canadian 1-cent coin of 1994. At first glance, there is nothing unusual about it. It carries the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, a design that had become a symbol of continuity and stability. The Queen's image, created with careful detail, reflects not just a monarch, but an era. For decades, her portrait appeared on coins across the Commonwealth, quietly witnessing history as it unfolded. On the reverse side, the iconic maple leaf twig, simple, elegant, instantly recognizable. The maple leaf is more than just a design. It is a national symbol of Canada, representing unity, resilience, and natural beauty. For generations, this image has remained almost unchanged, reinforcing a sense of identity that collectors deeply respect. So why would such a common coin, produced in massive numbers, ever reach a value that shocks even experienced collectors? The answer lies in something most people never consider: imperfection. You see, in the world of coin collecting, perfection is not always the most valuable trait. Sometimes, it's the mistake, the tiny deviation, the nearly invisible flaw that turns an ordinary coin into a rare artifact. During the minting process in 1994, millions of pennies were struck with precision. Machines worked tirelessly, stamping blank planchets into finished coins at incredible speeds. But even in the most controlled environments, errors can happen. And when they do, they create opportunities. Some 1994 Canadian pennies were struck under slightly unusual conditions. Variations in die alignment, pressure inconsistencies, and subtle planchet differences created coins that were just a little bit different from the rest. To the average person, these differences are invisible. But to a trained collector, they stand out immediately. There are stories within the coin community, quiet stories, passed between collectors at shows and auctions, about individuals who found these rare variations completely by accident. One man reportedly discovered his coin while sorting through a jar of loose change that had been sitting untouched for years. He wasn't searching for treasure. He was simply organizing coins, something many people do without a second thought. But something caught his eye: a slight difference in the way the design appeared. A detail that didn't match the others. At first, he dismissed it. Then curiosity took over. That curiosity turned into research, and that research turned into a realization that changed everything. Because what he had was not just another penny. It was a rare variant that collectors were actively searching for. And that moment, that simple decision to look a little closer, transformed a nearly worthless coin into something worth thousands. This is what makes coin collecting so fascinating. It's not just about age or metal content. It's about attention. It's about patience. And most importantly, it's about knowledge. The 1994 Canadian 1-cent coin sits at a unique point in history. It belongs to an era where pennies were still widely used, but their importance was slowly beginning to fade. Over time, inflation reduced their purchasing power, and eventually, Canada would phase out the 1-cent coin entirely. But in 1994, none of that was obvious yet. These coins were part of everyday life. They were used to buy small items, given as change, dropped, lost, and forgotten. And that's exactly why so many of them survived. But survival alone does not create value. rarity does. And rarity can come from the smallest details. Some of the most valuable 1994 pennies show characteristics that only appear under close inspection. Slight doubling in the lettering, minor shifts in the design alignment, differences in the metal composition or surface texture. These are not dramatic errors. They are subtle, and that subtlety is what makes them so easy to overlook and so valuable when discovered. Collectors often spend years studying these differences. They compare coins, analyze patterns, and build knowledge that allows them to identify these rare pieces instantly. But here's the surprising part. You don't have to be an expert to get lucky, because many of these coins are still out there, still sitting in old collections, still hidden in jars, drawers, and boxes, still waiting. And that possibility, that chance of discovery, is what keeps collectors searching. Now let's talk about condition, because condition is everything. A coin that has been heavily circulated, scratched, worn, and damaged will never reach the same value as one that has been preserved in near-perfect condition. Collectors use grading systems to determine this. They look at the sharpness of the design, the presence of scratches, the overall appearance, and even the original luster of the metal. A high-grade 1994 penny, especially one with a rare variation, becomes incredibly desirable. It represents not just rarity, but preservation. It tells a story of survival. Of a coin that somehow avoided the wear and tear of everyday use. And that combination, rarity plus condition, is what drives value to extraordinary levels. There is also something else at play here, emotion, because collecting is not purely logical. It's deeply personal. People are drawn to coins that connect them to a moment in time, a memory, a feeling. The 1994 penny may remind someone of a specific period in their life, a simpler time, a different world, and that emotional connection adds another layer of value, one that cannot be measured in numbers alone. As interest in rare coins continues to grow, more collectors are turning their attention to modern coins that were once ignored. Coins like the 1994 Canadian penny, coins that prove you don't need centuries of history to have incredible value. You just need the right combination of factors: rarity, condition, and a story. And this coin has all three. Now, as we reach the most important part of this story, it's time to answer the question that has been building from the very beginning. What is this coin actually worth? Not the average one you find in circulation, not the worn-out, heavily used version, but the rare, high-grade, collector-worthy 1994 Canadian 1-cent coin. The answer surprises even seasoned collectors, because under the right conditions, with the right characteristics, and in the right market, this coin has reached values of up to $51,000. Yes, for a single penny. And that number is not just about money. It represents discovery. It represents patience. It represents the idea that something small, something overlooked, can become something extraordinary. The next time you see a penny, don't ignore it. Take a closer look, because history has a way of hiding in the smallest places, and sometimes it's worth far more than you ever imagined. Before we move forward, take a moment to consider something. What if the real value of coin collecting isn't just in the price, but in the discovery? Because the next coin we're about to explore doesn't just follow the same path as the last one. It takes a completely different route, one that begins not with a quiet mistake in the minting process, but with timing, transition, and a subtle shift in history that most people never noticed. And yet, it produced a coin that today can reach $60,000. Now imagine holding that coin in your hand, without realizing what it truly represents. Let's go back 1 year earlier. At first glance, it seems almost identical to the 1994 penny we just explored. The same familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II appears on the front, calm and composed, representing continuity across decades. The same maple leaf twig rests on the reverse side, a symbol so deeply tied to Canadian identity that it almost fades into the background through repetition. To most people, this coin is indistinguishable from countless others. But to collectors, 1993 is not just another year. It is a turning point. Because sometimes, value is not created by what changes, but by what is about to change. The early 1990s were a period of quiet adjustment within the Royal Canadian Mint. Manufacturing techniques were evolving. Efficiency was improving. Materials, processes, and standards were being reviewed and refined. These weren't dramatic, headline-making changes. They were subtle, technical, easy to overlook. But in the world of coin collecting, those are the changes that matter most. Because when systems are adjusted, even slightly, variations can appear. And in 1993, they did. What makes the 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin so fascinating is not just a single error or flaw, but a combination of factors that together create rarity. Collectors often describe it as a perfect storm coin. Not perfect in condition, but perfect in circumstance. During this time, slight inconsistencies began to emerge in certain batches of coins. Differences in die preparation, minor variations in strike quality, subtle shifts in the way details appeared on the finished coin. Again, nothing obvious, nothing dramatic, but enough to create distinctions that careful collectors could identify. And once identified, those distinctions became desirable. One of the most talked about aspects of certain 1993 pennies is the clarity and definition of specific design elements. On some rare examples, the details appear sharper, more refined, almost as if the coin was struck under slightly different conditions. Edges may appear cleaner. Lettering may show slight variations. The overall impression, just a little different. To an untrained eye, it means nothing. To a collector, it means everything. There are also whispers within the collecting community, stories that circulate quietly, about transitional characteristics in 1993 coins. Features that seem to bridge older minting methods with newer refinements that would become more consistent in later years. These transitional traits are incredibly important because they represent a moment in time where change was happening, but not yet complete. And coins that capture these moments often become highly collectible. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Unlike coins that become rare because very few were made, the 1993 penny was produced in large numbers. Millions of them. So why are only a handful considered valuable? Because rarity is not just about how many were produced. It's about how many survived in the right condition with the right characteristics and were recognized for what they are. Most 1993 pennies lived hard lives. They circulated for years. They were handled, scratched, worn down, and eventually discarded or forgotten. Very few were preserved carefully. Even fewer were examined closely. And only a tiny number were identified as special. This is where the human element comes in. Because coins don't become valuable on their own. People give them value. Collectors study them. Experts analyze them. Markets respond to them. And slowly, quietly, a reputation begins to form. The 1993 Canadian penny began to gain attention among serious collectors who noticed these subtle differences. Discussions started. Comparisons were made. Examples were shared and studied. And as more people became aware, demand began to grow. But supply remained extremely limited. That imbalance is what drives value. There's a story often shared among collectors about a retired individual who spent years casually collecting coins without any serious intention of building a valuable collection. For him, it was simply a hobby, a way to pass time, a connection to history. One day, while reviewing his collection, he came across a 1993 penny that looked slightly different. Not dramatically, just enough to raise a question. Instead of ignoring it, he decided to investigate. That decision changed everything. After careful examination and expert evaluation, it became clear that his coin was one of the rare variations collectors had been searching for. A coin he had owned for years without realizing its significance suddenly became the centerpiece of his entire collection. Moments like this are what make coin collecting so compelling, because they remind us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it has to be discovered. Now let's talk about condition again, because just like with the 1994 coin, it plays a crucial role here. A 1993 penny in average circulated condition is still just a penny. But a high-grade example, one that has been preserved with minimal wear, becomes something entirely different. Collectors look for sharp details, clean surfaces, original luster. They look for coins that have escaped the normal aging process. And when such a coin also carries rare characteristics, its desirability increases dramatically. It becomes more than just a collectible. It becomes a prize. Another important factor is timing. The coin market has evolved significantly over the years. Modern coins that were once ignored are now being re-evaluated. Collectors are looking beyond ancient and classic coins and focusing on pieces that tell more recent stories. Coins like the 1993 penny. Coins that connect to a generation that is still here, still remembering, still collecting. This generational connection adds another layer of demand. Because people are not just buying coins. They are buying memories. They are buying pieces of their own past. And that emotional connection, combined with rarity and condition, creates powerful value. Now, as we approach the final moment of this story, think about everything we've uncovered. A common coin. A year that seemed ordinary. Subtle differences that most people would never notice. A handful of preserved examples. A growing community of collectors. And a rising demand driven by both logic and emotion. All of these elements come together to answer one simple question. What is the 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin really worth? Not in everyday terms. Not as loose change. But as a rare, high-grade, collector-recognized piece. The answer is extraordinary. Because under the right conditions, with the right characteristics, and in the hands of the right buyer, this coin has reached values of up to $60,000 for a single penny. Let that sink in. A coin that most people would overlook, ignore, or even throw away can carry a value that changes the way you see money entirely. And that is the true power of coin collecting. It transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. It turns small objects into stories. And it reminds us that history is not always found in museums. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket. So the next time you come across an old coin, don't rush past it. Take a closer look. Because you never know. You might already be holding something incredible.